welcome to Mia Horror Stories. To make it easier on your eyes, this video plays against a black screen, so you can close your eyes, get comfortable, and let the story take over. But don't relax too much, the ending might just catch you off guard. Stay with me until the very last word. The elevator chimed softly, and the metal doors slid apart with a gentle hiss. A stale, recycled air washed over Jake before the doors closed again behind him. He glanced at the panel 6th floor, just like every morning this week. His fingers, cramped from clutching a cheap canvas bag, relaxed a bit. The usual hum of the building settled around him. Somewhere, an air conditioning vent clicked on, and through the thin walls, muffled voices floated up from the lobby. Jake let out a slow breath, blinking against the dim, fluorescent lighting inside the elevator car. He wasn't late, yet, but the day already felt heavy. The usual crowd of people waiting for the elevator on his floor was gone this morning, replaced by an uncomfortable stillness. Not the sort of quiet that comes with empty spaces, but the kind that prickled the skin. Like something was just off, even if he couldn't say what. The doors slid open again, but it wasn't the 6th floor. He was on the 4th. A hallway stretched out, the kind you see in any mid-century office building. Beige paint cracked at the edges, cheap carpet dulled by years of footsteps. Fluorescent bulbs flickered weakly above, casting uneven pools of light. The smell was different here. A faint mustiness mixed with a sharp tang, something like burnt plastic or overheated wiring. It wasn't his floor. Jake's heart bumped hard in his chest, but he told himself to breathe, to think it through. Maybe the elevator malfunctioned. The doors were still open, the elevator waiting for him to step out. The panel inside blinked erratically. No call buttons lit, no floor numbers shifted. Jake looked back, the elevator still ready to close. Should he get out? Or press the button to close the doors and try again? He felt the weight of the canvas bag pressing against his ribs, his keys jangling inside. A faint noise from the hallway made him tense, a soft shuffle, maybe footsteps, or just the building settling. He couldn't tell. "Hello," he called, voice quieter than he expected. No answer. The corridor looked empty. He glanced at the panel again, then at the doors, then back down the hallway. A choice. Jake didn't think about it much until the moment it happened, but stepping out felt less like curiosity and more like a sudden, reflexive decision. Maybe he was tired, or maybe the silence tugged at him. Whatever it was, his foot moved forward, the elevator doors sliding shut behind him with a soft thud. He was alone. The hallway stretched on. No sign of other people. No sounds except the low hum of the building's ventilation system. Jake wiped his palms on his jeans, his breath shallow. The flickering lights overhead threw half shadows on the walls, making the peeling paint look worse than it was. He reached into his bag and pulled out his phone. No signal. That was the moment his stomach sank. He tried again, more forceful this time, nothing. Great, no service, just his luck. Jake looked back the way he'd come. The elevator doors were gone, replaced by a blank wall. No buttons, no panel, no sign of an elevator shaft. His pulse ticked faster. "Okay," he muttered. "Just a weird building glitch." But The place didn't feel right. Not the usual late morning office hum. The lights flickered again, the buzzing becoming more insistent. Then came a sound, barely more than a whisper, but definite. Footsteps, far down the hallway. Not fast, not urgent, slow, measured. Jake froze. The footsteps stopped suddenly, a soft scrape against the floor. Jake's eyes scanned the dim corridor, but no one appeared. He swallowed hard. A voice, low and uncertain, came from around the corner. "Hello?" Jake stepped forward, his voice cracking slightly. "Yeah, hello. I'm not sure where I am. This isn't my floor." The silence stretched long enough to make the hairs on his neck prick. Then a figure appeared. A woman, maybe mid-30s, her expression a mix of relief and suspicion. She held a steaming cup of coffee that sent a thin trail of steam curling upward. Her clothes were professional, but tired-looking. "Lost, huh?" she said with a nervous laugh. "You're not the only one." Jake exhaled, a bit of the tension easing. "I'm Jake. Clara." She glanced back the way she'd come, eyes wary. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but we should probably stick together. Better than wandering alone in this weird place." Jake nodded, the weight of his bag suddenly heavier. Clara pulled her coat tighter around her as they moved down the hallway, her footsteps quick but careful on the thin carpet. Jake followed close behind, eyes flicking to every shadow, every flicker of light overhead. The buzzing in the ceiling vents grew louder, almost mechanical, like a warning. "This floor shouldn't even be here," Clara said, voice low. "I work on the 7th. Never heard of a 4th like this, at least not one that looks like this." Jake nodded, the irregular hum in his ears making him feel off balance. He shifted his bag and tried his phone again. Still no bars, no messages, not even the little spinning icon that promised data connection eventually. "Any idea what's going on?" he asked. Clara glanced at him, eyes sharp. "Not really. But if you're hopping this is just some glitch, I wouldn't count on it. The building been in weird shape for a while." Jake stopped. "What do you mean?" She shrugged, like the weight of it was too much for a coffee break conversation. "Old wiring, bad inspections. I heard the HVAC's been acting up, people getting sick, headaches. Maintenance always delays repairs." Jake rubbed his neck. "Great." As they rounded the corner, the air grew warmer, stale, like the building was holding its breath. A faint smell of smoke drifted, not quite from fire, but close enough to put nerves on edge. "Do you smell that?" Jake whispered. "Yeah," Clara replied, her voice tighter now. "Electrical, probably overheated something." They found a door labeled utility closet, cracked open, a thin wisp of smoke slipping out. Jake peered inside. The room was filled with humming machinery, wires sparking faintly near the ceiling. "Should we call someone?" he asked. Clara shook her head. "No signal, no elevator. No one knows we're here." Jake's stomach churned. What if the fire alarms don't work? She sighed. Exactly what I'm afraid of. That place could burn down and no one'd hear it. The lights flickered violently, then went out altogether. A pulse of black. They froze. Then emergency lights blinked on, casting a harsh red glow over everything. The smell thickened. Heat prickled Jake's skin. "We need to get out now," Clara said. Jake's throat felt tight. His eyes darted toward the hallway end, but it was swallowed in shadow. "Which way?" he asked. Clara pointed to a narrow stairwell door, the metal frame scratched and dented. "That. Stairs always work." Jake moved toward it, but a loud crack made them both jump. From deeper in the hallway, a section of ceiling panel gave way, dust and plaster raining down in a small cloud. "Shit," Clara hissed. "Building unstable." Jake's mind raced. His fear of losing control pressed on him. He hated feeling powerless, trapped. But right now, all he wanted was out. They reached the stairwell door and pushed. Locked. "No way," Clara said, jiggling the handle. "It's jammed." Jake pulled at his bag strap, frustration building. "Try to find a fire extinguisher or something to force it." Clara nodded and stepped back into the hallway. Jake followed, but as they moved, the floor beneath them creaked, a hollow groan that seemed to echo endlessly. Suddenly, a faint voice came from somewhere behind the door. They'd left closed, the elevator shaft, maybe. "Help." Jake stopped, heart slamming. "Did you hear that?" Clara's face went pale. "Someone else is here." Jake swallowed. "We have to find them." "But we don't even know who," Clara said, voice tight. "Could be anyone." His mind jumped to the worst. Trapped workers, someone hurt, or worse, someone dangerous. The hallway suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. "Let's just get to the stairwell," Jake said, voice firmer than he felt. Clara hesitated, then nodded. They moved fast, the emergency lights flashing, casting long, jerky shadows. At the stairwell door, Jake tried again. Still locked. The pounding in his chest grew louder. Panic threatened to take hold. "Think it's the building," Clara said, breathing hard. "It's been condemned in parts for a reason." Jake swallowed down the panic, gripping the cold metal door frame. "We have to find another way," he said. Suddenly, the power flickered. The emergency lights blinked out. Pitch black. Jake's hands shot out, grabbing Clara's arm. "Don't move," he whispered. A metallic scrape echoed down the hall, slow and deliberate. They stood frozen as the sound approached, every second stretching thin. Then a voice, calm and measured, called out, "You're not supposed to be here." Jake's breath caught. Clara squeezed his hand. "We're leaving." "Not so fast," the voice said. A figure stepped into the dim red light, face obscured by shadows. There was no smile. Jake's control faltered, the familiar fear swallowing him. He realized that his worst fear wasn't just being trapped. It was losing control to someone else who wanted him there. The figure's shadow lingered in the harsh red glow, like a blot on the faded wallpaper. Jake's mind scrambled for something, anything to hold on to. Clara tugged his sleeve, her eyes wide, voice barely above a whisper. "We can't stay here." Jake nodded, though the tension had already coiled tight inside him. They needed a plan. They were trapped between a locked stairwell and a malfunctioning elevator shaft, with some unknown person watching them from the dark. The hallway stretched both ways, But behind them was where the elevator had vanished, a blank wall now, cold and indifferent. "We have to find another exit," Jake said. His voice was steadier than he felt. Clara took a breath, scanning the area. There was a fire door back toward the end of the hall, near that maintenance room. "I saw it when I first got here." Jake glanced down the hallway they'd come from, past the cracked utility closet with the sparking wires. The smoke smell was thicker now, the burnt plastic bite lingering in his nostrils. "Let's try that." They moved fast, feet barely touching the threadbare carpet. The red emergency lights flickered overhead, casting the walls in a sickly glow. The temperature seemed to rise with every step, sweat prickling at Jake's temples. As they neared the door Clara mentioned, a sudden crashing noise erupted somewhere behind them. They whipped around just in time to see a stack of metal filing cabinets topple, sending papers fluttering like dead leaves across the hall. Jake's heart pounded. "That wasn't the figure," Clara said sharply. "No way." The hallway was empty now, save for the scattered papers dancing under the weak emergency lights. Jake crouched, grabbing a crumpled page. It was a work order, stamped with the building's name, dated 2 months ago. Notes scrawled in the margin mentioned critical wiring issues and urgent repair. "Looks like the building's falling apart," Jake said grimly. "This isn't some haunted floor, it's a death trap." Clara exhaled, running her fingers through her hair. And whoever that was back there, maybe they're just another employee stuck here, or worse. Jake glanced at the fire door. It was marked with a simple push bar. He reached out, pressing down, but it didn't budge. "Locked," he muttered. "Try your keys," Clara suggested. Jake dug in his bag, fumbling through keys, until he found one marked maintenance, a last hope from his company-issued keyring. He slid it into the lock and turned. Nothing. "Great," he said, frustration tightening his jaw. No luck. The smell of smoke was thicker now, acrid and sharp. The emergency lights flickered again and sputtered, threatening to go dark. Clara tapped her phone against her palm, a nervous habit. Still no signal. Jake took a deep breath, the heat making it hard to think. His muscles ached, and the weight of the bag was suddenly unbearable. "Okay, plan B," Jake said, voice shaky. "Let's check the maintenance room." They slipped through the cracked utility closet door, avoiding the sparking wires as best they could. The room was cramped and cluttered old tools, broken fans, and a half-empty toolbox scattered across the floor. The air was thick and hot, making Jake's head swim. Near the back, a rusty panel hung open, revealing a jumble of wires, some melted, others sparking faintly. "Looks worse than I thought," Clara muttered. Jake spotted a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. He grabbed it, feeling a slight surge of hope. "Maybe we can use this to force the fire door open," he said. Clara nodded. "Or pry open the stairwell door if we find it again." Jake glanced back toward the hallway. A faint tapping noise echoed from somewhere deep inside the building, rhythmic and slow, like someone knocking. His skin prickled. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Clara nodded, eyes narrowing. Could be someone signaling for help or trying to scare us. They left the maintenance room cautiously, extinguisher in hand, and headed back toward the main corridor. As they approached the stairwell door again, Jake's hands trembled as he tested the handle. This time, it moved slightly under pressure. "Got something," he said, tugging harder. The door creaked open a crack, but then slammed shut suddenly with a loud bang. Clara stumbled back, hitting the wall. "Jesus," she gasped. "Wind." Jake's breath hitched. He reached for the handle again. It was locked fast now. What the hell? A cold draft seeped through the cracks, carrying a faint sound, voices, distant and muffled. Jake pressed his ear to the door. "Help," a whispered voice came through, desperate and urgent. His pulse sped. "Someone's trapped," he said. "We need to get them out." Clara looked uneasy. "Or maybe it's a trick. We don't know who it is." Jake's hands shook. His mind reeled with every possible scenario: a trapped worker, a panicked visitor, or a stranger with unknown intentions. Suddenly, the red emergency lights flickered out again. The hallway plunged into near-total darkness. Jake's breath hitched. He fumbled in his bag for his phone's flashlight. The beam was weak, flickering. Then from down the hall, a sharp clang echoed, metal hitting metal. Jake pointed the light toward the sound. 2 rats darted across the floor, disappearing into a cracked vent. Clara laughed nervously. False alarm. Jake forced a smile, though his nerves frayed like worn rope. They backed away from the stairwell door and moved down the hallway toward the fire door. As they reached it, Jake caught sight of a cracked window, frosted over, but large enough to offer a glimpse outside. The sky was gray, clouds thick and low. No sun, no movement. Jake pressed his forehead to the glass, heart sinking. They were trapped, cut off from the outside world. Clara rested a hand on his shoulder. "We have to keep moving." Jake swallowed hard, feeling exhaustion seep into his bones. His throat was raw, dry from shallow breaths. He glanced back one last time. The figure from before had vanished, but the footsteps were back, slow, steady, circling somewhere just beyond sight. And the locked stairwell door loomed between them and escape. There was no turning back. The sharp scrape of metal on metal echoed through the thickening haze as Jake pressed the fire extinguisher against the stairwell door, hands trembling but determined. Clara stood just behind him, her breath coming in quick bursts, eyes darting toward the dark hallway where the figure had vanished and reappeared in his mind like a shadowed threat. The smoke was heavier now, acrid and biting at their throats, curling under their noses like a warning they couldn't ignore. The flickering red emergency lights cast an unsteady glow, and the low hum of failing electricity was punctuated by distant groans of the building settling or coming apart. Jake swung the extinguisher with all his strength. The metal clanged against the doorframe. The handle rattled. The door gave a tiny creak, then stuck fast. "Keep going," Clara urged, voice harsh with strain. A sudden cough racked Jake's chest, sharp and painful. The heat pressed against his back, sweat stinging his eyes. His arms shook as he struck the door again, each blow slower, more desperate. "Jake," Clara said, her voice cracking. "Look out." Before he could react, A piece of plaster cracked loose from above, slamming into his shoulder. The impact knocked the extinguisher from his grip, sending it skittering across the floor. He stumbled, pain blooming bright and hot through his skin. Clara grabbed his arm, pulling him back as the ceiling groaned ominously. "We don't have much time," she shouted. Jake's lungs burned, every breath a ragged fight. The smoke filled the hallway, swallowing sound and sight. "Maybe the trapped person can open it from the other side," Clara said. Jake nodded, voice hoarse. "We have to try." He leaned close to the door, pressing his ear against the warped wood. "Hey, can you hear us?" He shouted over the roar in his ears. A faint scratching came from the other side. "Help," a trembling voice whispered. "Please." Jake felt a flash of something sharp: fear, hope, and then the unmistakable jingle of keys. "Where'd you get those?" Clara asked, eyebrows knitted. A faint metallic click, then the lock turned. The door swung open a crack. On the other side, a young man, pale and shaking, stumbled through. Cuts ran down his arm, dried blood crusted on his shirt. "I'm Mike," he gasped. "Got stuck when the power went out. Heard you banging." Jake and Clara exchanged a glance. Relief, maybe, but the danger wasn't gone. Behind Mike, the corridor stretched into darkness, thick smoke curling like tendrils from somewhere deeper. "We have to get out," Clara said, voice low but firm. Jake steadied himself, wiping sweat from his brow. The ache in his shoulder throbbed sharply. They moved quickly, Mike leading the way. The building moaned around them, ceiling panels rattling, loose wires sparking above. Every step was a gamble on whether the floor would hold. Suddenly, the distant roar of rushing air filled the hall. Jake's heart jumped. "What was that?" he asked. Mike pointed ahead, face pale. A water pipe burst on the 5th floor, flooding down this way. A rush of cold water surged from the stairwell entrance, spilling into the hall like a tidal wave. Jake's feet skidded, clutching the wall for balance. Clara shouted, "Go back, the other exit." Jake shook his head. "We don't have time." The hallway behind them was filling fast. Water hissed against electrical panels, sparks flying dangerously. "Follow me," Mike urged, stepping over cables dripping with water. They turned down a narrower corridor, damp and shadowed, the air heavy with smoke and the metallic tang of electricity. Jake's head spun, fatigue pressing down like a weight. His breathing was shallow, the cuts on his arms stung from the heat. Clara stumbled, gasping. "Are you okay?" Jake asked, steadying her. She shook her head, eyes wide. I'm fine, just tired." Mike paused at a heavy metal door marked emergency exit. Jake tried the handle. It was locked. "Damn it," Mike muttered, digging into his pocket for keys. Jake's eyes flicked to the extinguisher, now lying discarded nearby. "We can use that," he said, urgency sharpening his voice. Mike nodded, grabbed the extinguisher, and slammed it against the lock. The metal resisted, but after a few strikes, the door creaked open. Fresh air rushed in, cool and sharp against their overheated skin. They spilled through into the stairwell, the smell of smoke fatting slightly behind them. Jake slumped against the wall, the pain in his shoulder and chest screaming now. Exhaustion crashing over him like a wave. Clara leaned on Mike, tears streaking down her face. "We made it," she whispered, voice trembling. But the danger wasn't over. Behind them, the building groaned louder, a deep, rumbling crack splitting the air. Jake looked up just in time to see part of the ceiling collapse. In the corridor, they'd fled. Dust and debris filled the stairwell entrance, blocking their path back. He swallowed hard, the cold grip of fear tightening around his chest. "We're trapped," Mike said quietly. Jake's legs felt weak. Clara blinked rapidly, swallowing back the panic. The three of them stood in the stairwell, the only way out a narrow, winding staircase leading down into shadow. Jake's shoulder throbbed unbearably, and his breath came in shallow gasps. But he forced himself to move. One step, then another. The building shook again, a tremor that rattled the walls and sent loose plaster raining down. Jake looked back once, the dark hallway sealed behind rubble. No elevator, no other exit, just the stairs and whatever waited for them below. The stairwell's narrow concrete steps felt unforgiving beneath Jake's trembling feet as he descended, each breath shallow and ragged. Clara and Mike followed close behind, faces pale but determined, their shadows flickering against the grimy walls. Outside, the muffled wail of sirens cut through the thick night air. When they finally spilled out onto the cracked pavement, the chaos of emergency crews unfolded before them. Fire trucks with hoses spraying the building's scorched exterior. Paramedics tending to the shaken and injured. The streetlights glared with unnatural sharpness, the normal hum of a city evening already feeling oddly distant. Jake sagged against a fire truck's cold metal side, the dull throb in his shoulder, now a relentless ache. His shirt was smeared with dirt and dried sweat, the cuts along his arms raw but not deep. Clara sat nearby on the curb, knees drawn up, her eyes glassy as she stared ahead. Mike was wrapped in a blanket, visibly younger than Jake and Clara, clutching his arm where the wound had bled through his shirt. The medics worked efficiently, but their calm professionalism only deepened the surreal edge of the scene. Jake's mind refused to slow, replaying the moments inside the building, the flickering red lights, the locked stairwell door, the smell of burning plastic and wet concrete, the shadowed figure whose face he never fully saw. "Can you tell me what happened?" a young paramedic asked gently, kneeling beside Jake. Jake blinked, the sharp edges of memory hitting him like fresh bruises. "I got stuck on a floor that didn't exist," he said, voice tight. "The elevator took me somewhere else. The building was falling apart. There was smoke, fire, flooding. We had to find a way out." The medic nodded, glancing at Clara and Mike, who were answering similar questions. Jake caught Clara's eye. She gave a small, tired smile, but it didn't reach her face. "We're lucky," she murmured. "Could have been so much worse." Minutes passed in a blur of medical checks and police officers taking statements. The building's owners had been notified. The city inspector's office was already closing off the block. The official story was a failure in the building's electrical system that caused both a fire and flooding, trapping several people on a disused floor, an unregistered floor. Some called it hidden in the blueprints, but never fully cleared or maintained. Jake found himself staring at the tape that cordoned off the building. The harsh yellow strip stretching taut like a barrier between the world he'd known and the one he'd just escaped. At one point, a police officer approached Clara. "Ma'am, can you confirm the identity of the man who helped you?" Clara hesitated. "Mike," she said, "he works here, was trapped." The officer nodded, jotting down notes. Jake's stomach twisted. The mystery figure who had appeared earlier, the man who warned them, had never been mentioned again. He wondered briefly if Mike was connected or just another victim. The question lingered, unanswered. Later at the hospital, Jake sat on a stiff plastic chair, his shoulder bandaged and ice wrapped around the swelling bruise. Clara paced the small waiting room, phone pressed to her ear, arranging for a ride home. Mike was being treated for dehydration and minor cuts, but was expected to recover quickly. Jake's thoughts were tangled, raw nerves humming just beneath the surface. He'd always feared losing control, being trapped physically or emotionally. But now he realized how fragile the veneer of normalcy really was. The building's failures mirrored his own unraveling calm. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent. A janitor wheeled a cart down a quiet hospital hallway, his footsteps soft against the linoleum. He paused briefly outside a storage closet. The door cracked open just enough to reveal tangled wires and a faint smell of burnt plastic. He glanced over his shoulder, then shut the door firmly, turning away without a word. Jake's eyes closed briefly, exhaustion pulling at him. The ordeal was over, but something inside him had shifted. The elevator had opened to a floor that shouldn't have existed, and he wasn't sure the story was done. That's tonight's story. If it gives you chills, make sure to like, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and tap the bell so you never miss what's coming next. And if you're still brave enough, there are more dark tales waiting for you right here on the channel. Go watch another if you dare.